What is up, my ducks and drakes? Welcome to the Crowded Lake. Today we are reading the rest of La La Land, Santa Star's fanfic by Bekka911 on Wattpad. If you'd like to check out the author or the book for yourself, please look at the links in the description below, along with my links to the Google form where you can recommend future Wattpad Read Aloud books. I'd really appreciate it, and all of that stuff, you know? Particularly, we'll be reading 3 chapters today instead of 2, just because there is an odd amount of chapters, so I can't go exactly by 2s. So we'll be finishing off the rest today with 3 chapters. Any trigger warnings will be in the description below, and with that, we will be starting chapter 13. It took him too long to dredge up the courage to attempt to leave his room. Virgil had left him riddled with poisoned veins, had abandoned him to the coldness of fear, and done nothing but dangle the lifeline in front of the prince, only to wrap it around the royal's neck, and now he was choking on it, dying with each breath. "I'm going to go and talk to them," Roman muttered to himself, pacing. "I have to apologize and explain. How would they do? Get mad at me? Doubt it." He froze. There I was. It couldn't be that easy, yet there it was. If he wanted to, he could make the words appear in front of him. He could see them hovering just in front of his eyes because they were there, made a lifeline and hope and a painful desperation. It all fit together now. It was clear to him what he was doing was wrong. He was doubting the wrong things, looking from all the wrong angles. He let Dylan overpower his thoughts, and now Roman had it all figured out. "Will they accept your apology, though?" Dylan hissed. Roman wanted to laugh. "And what? Turn me away? I doubt it." The crackling static in his ear faltered, just a little bit, and Roman felt weight lift from his shoulders. Of course, he didn't need to doubt himself, and he didn't need to doubt the others. He just needed to doubt Dylan. What are you doing?" Dylan asked, and Roman could hear an edge to Doubt's voice. "Roman, you aren't strong enough for this yet." "Of course I am," Roman sneered. "Aren't you strong enough to stop me?" There was nothing but victory in Roman's heart as Dylan whispered to himself. "Am I?" "Dylan," Roman said, "I win." "Do you?" Dylan said, but Roman just smirked at him until Doubt sighed in defeat. "I wish you the best, Roman." "I don't need anything more from you," the royal told him firmly, but still he lingered. "I bid you farewell, old friend." Dylan managed a shaky smile. "Maybe the stars will allow us to meet another time." "Maybe," Roman murmured as Dylan started to fade, the humming in his ear crackling into silence. "Maybe not." But there was still black on his walls, still black in his heart. He wasn't fine yet, wasn't good enough. He needed to do more. He needed to stop and breathe. He closed his eyes, sucked in a breath, and soothed his frantic thoughts. The smell of sickly sugar was gone from the air, and without it cloying his every breath, Roman thought he could taste the creativity, the freedom in the world around him. It all seemed far too easy, Roman thought, but he couldn't question it. To question it would be invite doubt. No, he needed his confidence and his pride. He needed to help his host. Oh, dear Odin, Thomas! He needed to check on his host, or should he talk to his fellow sides first? How could he choose between them? He'd been locked away for so long, he missed so much, he didn't know who he was in that condition. It was terrible. "Start with Virgil," he whispered, taking another exaggerated breath. "You are a prince, Roman. You shouldn't be flustered by such things. Talk to your fellow sides and decide where to go from there." It sounded reasonable enough. If only he could summon the will to walk through his door and confront those he had hurt. He stepped forward, caught sight of himself in the mirror, and stopped abruptly. He looked terrible. His hair was messy and greasy and dull, matted and curled. His clothes were rumpled and hardly approachable for one such of himself. He had to change. Immediately. Surprisingly, when he snapped his fingers, his clothes tugged and morphed until he was standing in a suit once more, his hair rapidly smoothed and folded into place. His makeup was minimal and simplistic. Not his first choice, but it will do. He checked himself over a final time and deemed himself ready to venture back out into his world of wonders. He sighed, cracked open the door. He couldn't do this. He straightened his shoulders, took a step. He had to. Chapter 14. Turns out, he could talk to all his fellow sides because they were all gathered in the studio. Their conversation cut off as he walked in the room, as he fought to keep his head held high as their eyes watched him. Patton gasped quietly as Roman held his hand out and made a rose that glowed softly. His hopeful eyes met Roman's, and the royal just said, "Dylan's gone." Patton let out a squeak before rushing forward and engulfing Roman in a tight hug. The royal didn't hesitate to hug back, relishing in the affection and positive attention. "I'm so proud of you," Patton whispered in his ear. "And I forgive you for everything." Roman wanted to tell him that he shouldn't forgive him, that Patton should protect himself, but he kept his mouth shut and nodded instead. "Thank you," he murmured. Virgil gave his counterpart a small smile. "So, are you back to Disney songs and Broadway references?" "Sure am, Virg." And there was so much more Roman wanted to say, so much more he had to apologize for, but the words shriveled up in his throat, and he could only force out silence. For a moment, it was quiet. Then Logan stepped forward. "Roman, I believe we all need to talk. We need to discuss Dylan's reappearance and how much pressure you've been under lately. Then we could talk about Thomas." "Thomas comes first," Roman said stubbornly. Virgil sighed lightly. "Princey, by putting yourself first, you're putting Thomas first. Just worry about yourself for once." "Indeed," Logan added. "Thomas needs you 100% better so that he may grow himself. If your doubt, Dylan, has affected you too much, we need to find out now and try to fix it before it can affect Thomas more." And goodness. There it was, blunt as ever. There were no fancy words, no clouds of smoke. He had endangered Thomas and his ego during this, even if he hadn't mean to. Confidence was a fragile thing, glass easily shattered by small rocks. Roman let out a deep breath and tried to inconspicuously disperse the shaking in his hands. "Of course," he said. "If it will benefit Thomas, he shall have our conversation." "Roman, how did you defeat Dylan?" Patton asked, and the royal tensed slightly. "Last time it took you longer, and it was a lot more grueling." A fair question, Roman supposed, but one that hurt all the same. "Suffering through his appearance was grueling," he told them. "But his defeat, I figured it all out. I used his own effect against him." "Explain," Logan said, genuinely interested. Perhaps his endeavor could benefit the others in the future. "I didn't need to doubt myself. I just needed to doubt him." Roman smiled softly, messed with the rose in his hands. "As soon as he was gone, it was easier to breathe, to clear my head. I centered myself, came to find you." Virgil took a few deep breaths before clearing his throat. "Why did he come back?" "And here," Roman froze. A tricky question, hard to answer, hard to endure. Why had Dylan come back? What had summoned him again after all this time? Deep down, Roman already knew his answer, but it was harsh and accusatory. You. I don't know, he lied, struggling slightly. Perhaps the pressure after the mind blank, the blame I had for myself. I was embarrassed, caught off guard. Perhaps he came in a moment of weakness. Or, Virgil said quietly, you're just really insecure, and it was the last push before you broke. How shrewd, Roman thought. How clever of him. Me? He said, incredulously, pressing a hand over his heart. Insecure? Please. I'm a prince. What do I have to be insecure about? And instead of words, Virgil just gave him a look that finally broke through Roman's most inner walls. He deflated, dropping his mask, his cover. He let them all see him. And he was, without the makeup, and the signs, and the front he always had, even when he was upset. I am always tired nowadays, he admitted softly, looking down at his flower. I cannot find it in myself to live in reality, and I can barely handle the weight of dreams and love. Patton made a small noise, something akin to a whimper, and reached for his fellow's side, stopping just before he made contact. Oh, Roman? He whispered. Why didn't you tell us? Roman could only offer him a shattered truth. I didn't know how. Chapter 15. Somehow, it seemed easier to be in front of the camera. He couldn't feel the weight of performing on his shoulders, nor could he feel himself drowning under the pressure or pretending. He could be himself. He would be himself. Because that's what Thomas needed. That's what Roman needed. Thomas hasn't hesitated when the four of them apparently, suddenly, appeared and asked to talk. Roman had been the one to suggest making it a video. Virgil had eyed him, but said nothing. So, Thomas said, clapping his hands lightly. What is it? Roman cleared his throat. I have to apologize and to explain, he said, holding his head high. He expected fear to set in his stomach alight, but instead of butterflies, he felt steady. He could do this. There are multiple layers to any person, you know that. Virgil explored his hidden side when you tried the anxiety pills. Roman didn't mention the way Thomas flinched. His emotions made a personal side for him. Virgil, do you wish to explain this yourself? Virgil snickered. Wish? That's funny. But, he continued, sobering up, Roman is correct. My feelings manifested as its own personal depression. Thomas gasped. His name was Derek, Roman added, and the smile Virgil sent him was bright enough to set off fireworks in the royal's chest. He was my friend, Virgil admitted. He encouraged me. He was a support system, I guess. We understood each other. I defeated him, though. After you guys came into my room, I got better. He's the one who gave me the purple hoodie. Oh, Virgil, Thomas said slowly. I had no idea. Neither did we, Roman said, glancing at Patton. For once the father figure looked troubled and tense. Logan figured it out. I overreacted. It got complicated in your head for a little while. Virgil shuffled awkwardly. Well, yeah. Now it's over. But that's not what we are here to talk about, Roman. The royal sighed, looking down at his hands. What would Thomas think? Would he be mad? Could Roman even admit that he'd been so weak? Stop. He thought harshly. Stop. You've got this. Have confidence. I'm sure you know the effect each of us has on you, he began, and Thomas nodded, looking slightly dazed. Well, we also have effects on each other. As our rooms demonstrate, Patton often lifts the mood, though sometimes he increases sadder feelings. Logan is usually calm in most situations, and is first to notice smaller details. Virgil, well, we know that so far, and I increase drama. Roman? The whale laughed nervously, cutting Virgil off. Kidding! He cleared his throat. What I'm trying to say, Thomas, is that in the beginning, it was just me and you. Best buds, smearing paint everywhere we could. That was your creativity, and your ego, and your confidence. I had full control. When Patton was introduced, you had just grasped the concept of right and wrong. You were still a young princeling, though, so Patton and I existed side by side. Neither of us ever worried about each other. When Logan showed up, it got tricky. I wasn't used to sharing, wasn't used to being limited. It was just a small struggle, but Patton liked him well enough, so we found a rhythm after a while. Thomas let out a long breath. And then Virgil, Roman agreed. He wasn't a bad thing, Thomas, but we are opposites. He crippled me in ways I hadn't expected. I couldn't deal. Every move I made was questioned. Your confidence was shattered, your ego gone. I lost control almost completely, and I scrambled to find some way to add my input, to hold on to the reins. This is the first time I ever met Dylan. Dylan? Roman squeezed his hands together, focusing on the tightening of his skin, then the worried and confused eyes of his host. Dylan is my own personal doubt, with a capital D. He amplified the chaos that Virgil brought with him, and let's just say it took me a while to bounce back, but I did. His voice quieted a little. I did. It was silent for a moment. Roman desperately trying to keep his thoughts in order. His heart was beating faster each second nobody said anything, and he gripped his hands tighter and tighter until it started to hurt. Roman? Did he come back? Thomas asked gently. Roman bit his lip, nodded once. Recently, after the mind blank, it was so weird. He's gone now, but yeah, he came back. I'm proud of you. It was the last thing he expected his host to say, and Roman looked up sharply, his hands falling away from each other. His eyes were wide, his pulse raced, and he stared at Thomas. He stared and stared because nobody had ever said they were proud of him before. Thomas grinned softly, a glimmer in his eyes that Roman couldn't quite identify. You defeated your doubt. Twice, Thomas said. I'm proud of you. Roman wasn't getting teary. He wasn't. He couldn't ruin his makeup. Thank you, he managed. I'm so sorry. And Roman's heart melted, shuddering, healed and glowed all at once as Thomas, Logan, Patton, and Virgil all told him, you have nothing to be sorry for. Thank you all so much for listening. If you'd like to stay tuned for the next book, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get notified when it comes out next week. Please support me using the links in the description, including the link to my Etsy shop, where you could support me by buying beaded things. Support the author, please. I'd also appreciate it if you did that. Once again, I really appreciate you watching, and much like Roman trying to talk to Thomas, do your best.